Good evening and welcome to our special coverage of election night here on RFL. I'm Richard French. It's going to be an eventful evening. Polls, they've just closed in the first two states, Indiana and Kentucky, and 1 hour from now at 7 p.m. Eastern, 8 more crucial states will have their polls closing, including Georgia and Virginia, plus most of Florida except for the Panhandle, which is in the Central Time Zone. Now, we want to make you tonight a huge part of our program, not just to tell you what's going on, but also to hear from you in this historic election what your decision was, who you voted for, and why. And we're opening up our phone lines to give you the platform to tell us that answer. Our toll-free numbers, 888-766-2428 or 888-RNN-CHAT. If you're on the east of the Mississippi, we've set up separate phone lines. For our viewers out west, that number is 855-735-2289 or 855-RFL-CATX. Again, we'll be getting to those phone calls throughout this evening, but it's always best, instead of just telling you the whys and what's going on, to hear from the people who in the end made the decision. Why you voted for who and where you want to see this country go for the next 4 years or not go. Tonight, we will be here till the night is done, whenever that is, if we'll even have a decision in the early morning hours. We're going to have our senior political correspondent with me the whole night, Andrew Whitman. He's going to join us at the Big Map, counting all the electoral votes as they come in. Plus, we're going to be joined on set by 2 former Republican congressmen. Throughout the night, we're also going to remind you of what is at stake. The pandemic still raging, America's standing in the world tenuous at best, the rule of law itself on the ballot in many ways. And we'll also speak with the former federal prosecutor about legal exposure this president could have once he leaves office, if he leaves office. It is a big night, and we are live all night for you. Let's kick off coverage with some of the sights and sounds from Election Day. After a record more than 100+ million early and mail-in voters cast their ballots, millions more headed to the polls on Election Day.
I would have swam across the lake of alligators to vote today. This isn't about one person or Joe Biden or Donald Trump. This is about America.
A long, bitter battle between President Donald Trump and his opponent, former VP Joe Biden, coming to a close. Biden still campaigning today in Pennsylvania.
If you haven't gotten everybody out, get them out.
Biden headed into Election Day ahead in most major polls, but this morning, a confident President Trump saying he expects to do better in the Electoral College than he did in 2016.
We're going to have a great night, and we're going to have, much more importantly, we're going to have a great 4 years.
Yesterday, the candidates making their final push in the battleground states.
The power to change this country is in your hands.
This does not look like a second-place finish.
The candidates' campaign strategies about as different as the candidates themselves, both envisioning 2 distinctly different futures for America as a country still gripped by the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 cases in the U.S. climbing past 9 million, hospitalizations on the rise in every battleground state. Trump telling supporters the end of COVID is near.
That ends the pandemic, and it will end anyway. They hate it when I say we're rounding the corner. It's going to end anyway, but the vaccine will make it go a lot quicker.
Biden, as he's done throughout the campaign, hammering Trump for his handling of the virus.
We're going to beat this virus. We're going to get it under control. And the first step to beating this virus is beating Donald Trump.
All right, I want to bring in Andrew now for a look at what he's watching for in particular tonight.
Well, Rich, first of all, it's important to note that Joe Biden is going to take a polling lead into election night, but odds are we won't be able to declare a winner tonight, though we may be able to end the night with a pretty good idea of how it'll all wrap up. Maybe. Let's take a look at the final numbers through 5:38. The final poll average has Biden at 53.4% and holding an 8-point national lead over Donald Trump. Biden is an 89% favorite to win. Just to give you nightmares, there is a 1% chance of a tie in the Electoral College. Democrats win the Senate in 3 out of every 4 simulations, and they're 97% favorites to keep control of the House. When you factor all of that in with the state trends that we've seen, with where we are in particular states, what does that mean on the big board? Well, let's take you over there now. And as we factor in the states that we've already been able to include, based on those leanings and the tendencies within the states, things like New York and California we're projecting will eventually go towards Joe Biden, and we're projecting Oklahoma and Louisiana will eventually go towards Donald Trump. Again, these are just the safest states, which brings us to the electoral vote total right now. Well, there you see it's 0-0 right now. But if we come back to me on the board, it's Joe Biden sitting at 216, Donald Trump with 125. So how do we fill up these gray spaces to get to a winner? Well, Biden has an easier path to 270 electoral votes than Donald Trump does. Let's go to those states. If Joe Biden wins all of these states tonight, he will be the next president of the United States. And he leads in the polls of all of them. But Pennsylvania is not going to be called tonight. So as we come in here and we start to award those states to Joe Biden, and we'll give those 4 states to him, and we'll leave Pennsylvania blank for now. You see Biden gets to 258 electoral votes. That's still not enough to get him over the top. He needs Pennsylvania to get there. So if Biden can't win Pennsylvania, he could get some help in getting over the top tonight, and he could do that from some races that we expect to be called tonight fairly early in the night, and in favor of potentially, or these are states that Donald Trump is going to have to win when we get there. Let's get to those Trump early key states now, if we can. Again, if Donald Trump wins every state on the board, he'll be close to 270 electoral votes, but he's trailing in the polls in at least 3 of them. Biden can puncture Trump's chances with a win in any of these states. Trump needs a near sweep to be reelected, and he trails in polling in 3 of them. All 5 of those states, or 4 of those 5 states, have Republican governors, by the way. Almost no way to get there for Donald Trump without Texas or Florida. So Trump needs to win those 5 states, or he's going to have to make up ground elsewhere. Where can he make up that ground? From 3 states that Biden needs, not for the math, but really to put everyone's minds at ease. We expect a final count in Minnesota. These are the Midwest states that have been giving Democrats headaches. We expect a final count tonight in Minnesota, but not in Michigan. Maybe late in the night in Michigan. Wisconsin could be counting until dawn. Biden leads in all 3 of these states. But again, these are the states where the polling was most off in 2016, and we may not get final calls on all of them tonight. Of course, we're also watching the fight for control of the Senate. Late polls have tightened the outcomes in some key states. Now, we expect Democrat Doug Jones to lose in Alabama tonight, and we expect Democrat Gary Peters to win re-election in Michigan tonight. If that happens, Democratic wins in these 5 states would give them 51 seats. All of them look good, but some late polling has shifted Iowa towards the Republican lean. As for these other states, both Senate races in Georgia remain tight. Republicans have been making polling gains in these other states. Georgia, we could get both called tonight. We might get neither called tonight. Finally, we're getting some exit polls from voters early on. Let's run through some of them briefly. Now, these were day of voters coming out of their polling places, so this may be a more Republican crowd giving these polling answers, but 34% listed the economy as their top issue. Racial inequality came in second, the coronavirus, crime and safety, and healthcare policy, that through CNN. Another poll about the focus with the virus, 52-42 split on whether we should contain the virus or rebuild the economy. On the virus response, you see the split there. 51% say it's going badly, 48% say it's going well. Wearing a mask, 68% say it's a public health responsibility, 30% say it's a personal choice. And we have one more that we can get to, which is 53% of voters in exit polls have said that they want to keep Obamacare. 61% said the Supreme Court was important. 58% listed themselves as being angry with the federal government. And Rich, again, if this is a final as people are walking out of the polling places today polled, you would think that is a pro-Trump or Trump-leaning crowd. Those numbers weren't exactly what you would expect from a Trump-leaning crowd. That could potentially be an indication of tight races as people are walking out of polling places today.
Andrew, thank you. And, you know, we went into tonight, Andrew, concerned about a whole host of things, including, you know, after the ugly incidents that we saw shutting down bridges, we saw what happened with the Trump, you know, the caravan that surrounded the Trump campaign bus, et cetera. So far, knock on wood, it has been a safe day in America, and I think a celebration of democracy. We're going to get into a lot of stuff where we're going to hear a lot of anger coming out tonight, but Yes, there was some misleading robocalls, there was some technical glitches. I don't think there's malfeasance, but Andrew, overall, we had a lot of Americans who voted and participated in the democratic process, both early and today. And for the most part, we've had a peaceful vote here, what's been building for 4 years, and I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, we had some issues over the weekend with early voting, and we saw some of those Trump trains running into the Biden bus in Texas, as well as incidents in Virginia and New Jersey and New York. Not a lot of reporting of any real problems so far today. One of the reasons for that may be because we've had 102 million votes cast early, either through the mails or through early voting, which, you know, if you use the 2016 turnout as a guide, where there were about 145 million people who turned out, there's only, you know, a third of the voting population who are left out there to vote today, Rich.
All right, Andrew, thank you. I want to bring in our first guest tonight to discuss what he's hearing on the ground from the campaign, Stephen Shepard. He's Politico's senior campaign and elections editor and chief polling analyst. You know, Stephen, I've been looking at these exit polls. I'm not sure what to make of them, and I also know putting too much stock in them is always dangerous. But could you glean any major takeaways, given how many people voted early and from the sampling of the people who showed up today?
You know, I think when you're talking about these really early waves of exit polls, these are just the nuggets that the networks choose to release prior to the first polls closing entirely in a state. You know, polls are closed in most of Indiana and Kentucky, but not in the entire state. So they don't want to give away too much. They are also, I should mention, they are interviewing, and they did interview people on the phone who voted by mail. That's part of this, as are people who were interviewed at early vote centers in states that have big early vote centers. They had in-person interviewers there too. And this is all melded together. I think that sort of raises questions about the exit polls, you know, and relying too heavily on them early in the night. The great thing about exit polls is after the election, we can look at the result and weight the exit poll back to that to make sure it's accurate. We can't do that right now because we don't have any results from this election. So my feeling is just to bring a big bell of caution here and wait and see what the voters have to say, because we're going to find out, at least in a number of states, not in every state, we're going to find out soon enough.
All right, one of the things I was really concerned about, and tell me if you think we should breathe a relatively sigh of relief, Stephen, is that the mail-in component to this, and obviously in a pandemic, understandable that it is. Then you had the slowdown and some of the cuts in funding related to the Postal Service. You had today federal judge getting involved saying, you know, I want you guys to scour these particular these mail centers here to see why some of these ballots have been returned. We don't know exactly. Maybe people voted in person. Maybe they're en route. Maybe, you know, they just never exercised to use that mail-in ballot. I'm also saying that the numbers of people that actually mailed in ballot is actually superseding 2016 as a frame of reference. How much is this going to be a storyline going forward about people who properly got their, you know, ballots stamped in time before November 2nd and got them out, but are still somewhere sitting in limbo?
Yeah, I think a lot of that depends on how close this election is and what we're talking about tomorrow. If we're talking about Joe Biden winning this election, if we're talking about President Trump being reelected, then very little discussion is going to be there for the problems and the things that went wrong in the system. If we do not have a result, and as Andrew was saying, there is different degrees of not having a result here. How much suspense is there? Is the election really up for grabs at the end of the night because we're waiting on some of those states like Pennsylvania? That all remains to be seen. But if we are, you know, in Pennsylvania, there's still an active Republican court-led lawsuit to exclude ballots that, even if they were postmarked today, that don't arrive at elections offices by 8 o'clock tonight, that they arrive the next day or the day after they were supposed to be included. Republicans are seeking to reverse that in court, which means all of these folks who may have gotten their ballot in the mail today or yesterday or maybe even Saturday, when those ballots haven't arrived, they may not end up being included. That's going to be a huge controversy if the election ends up coming down to it. And we don't know the answer to that right now.
What does it tell you that the Biden camp is most focused tonight, they said, on Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia? We all know Pennsylvania, everyone's going to be watching, but the fact that they're putting those states in play, none of which that were carried by a Democrat 4 years ago, do you think at least that their outward optimism tells you they think they got this tonight?
I don't know after what happened in 2016 that you could describe any Democrat as optimistic at any point. What it tells me is those are the states that we're going to know, and we're going to know pretty early in the night, especially with Florida and North Carolina, which have reputations for counting quickly. In North Carolina, they say they expect to tally 97% of the vote tonight. Florida, despite its 2000 reputation, has really improved its vote counting, and we could get a call in Florida, even in a close race, in the 9 or 10 o'clock hour tonight. I think they know that they can really foreclose a lot of Trump's chances by picking off one or two, or certainly all three of those states. And if they do, that changes the discussion and the narrative around tonight. However, if they don't, if Trump picks up all three, as Andrew went through the map, that keeps him in the ballgame and means we are waiting on some of those states where we know we're not going to get a resolution tonight in a close race.
Finally, I'm about to speak to Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, and I'm willing to bet that he feels good about Biden's chances tonight there. From what you're seeing between turnout and everything else, does the Biden camp, given all the sweat equity they put into that state, do they have a reason to feel optimistic? I know the polls had him up by about a half a dozen points, maybe a little tighter than that. They seem to be staking basically the campaign on winning Pennsylvania.
Certainly. That's where Joe Biden spent both Sunday and most of Monday. And he was back there again today. So the last 3 days of the campaign, Joe Biden in Pennsylvania, it's not just that Pennsylvania is so obviously symbolically important for the Biden campaign. It's a state in which he was born. Obviously, flipping for the first time since 1988 in the 2016 election was a huge blow to Democrats who'd held the state since then. It also is a state where if there is any kind of late movement, that's where you'd see it, because unlike states, the states we mentioned in the last question, Florida, North Carolina, and Georgia, where the vast majority of voters voted early, in Pennsylvania, we believe half or about a majority of the vote is either going to be cast in person today or delivered in the mail today. So that means there's a lot more room for movement, a lot more room to get that turnout during the day today and into the evening. Polls are still open in Pennsylvania for another hour and 20 minutes. If you're in line when the polls close, you have to be allowed to vote. So there's still time for things to change on the ground. And I think it speaks, if the senator is indeed confident, it would speak to the investments that Democrats have put into taking the state back after that really shocking loss 4 years ago.
Stephen Shepard, great job. I appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, coming up next, the aforementioned Pennsylvania. It is, of course, one of, if not the most important states in 2020. Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they've been spending a ton of time there as they try to win its 20 electoral votes. After the break, Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania, he'll join us to discuss what's at stake in his state.